on us.
Yes.
Never gonna give, never gonna give.
Seen the video to this song there, Sip?
Sip was in the video.
I don't. I mean, I have a vague memory of it.
All right, that's fair. Do you have hey, speaking of your memory, which is okay.
Horrible.
Yeah, because I was going to say it's like an elephant, and then I'm like, nah. Maybe
What
like
kind of an elephant?
Maybe like the bird that's outside of my house that keeps bothering me at 3:30 in the morning. But do you remember at a Board of Regents meeting about 6.5 years ago, Ronnie Green said, Nebraska likely will play no Friday night games at home. Now, the networks take over, and Nebraska is going to play a Friday night home game in 2024. Back in 2017, Sip, I'm sure that it was 97% of no Friday night home games. Let's fast forward. Your reaction on your show, on the boards, and your own reaction. How much of a difference is it on our reaction to Nebraska playing at home on a Friday night?
I mean, my reaction is really cynical. I mean, I mean, if Fox told you to play in Winnipeg on a Tuesday night, that's what you do. That's just what it is. It's really that. Bombers. I mean, you don't really need to take the discussion that much further. This is a money discussion. They're in college football and college athletics. It's usually just now a money discussion, right? That's all we talk about. When we talk about the stadium, it's, how much money can you raise? Where you're going to handle the East and West first because you got to follow the money. This is just a money discussion. 2017, it wasn't quite as much as it is now, but it was. I don't remember that occurrence with Ronnie Green saying that, but I did read it in Sam's story, and I chuckled. Things have changed. It's not. I don't think it's the end of the world at all. I understand the high school discussion. That it's not ideal in that regard, and I think also I do feel for the businesses, not just downtown Lincoln, but all over Lincoln. That you're taking money out of people's pockets. But again, it just comes back to this is the world we're in. College football is ran by TV executives. We don't know who they are. They're faceless. Generally, you might know Gary. You guys might know a little bit more than I do, but generally they're just faceless beings that are running the show behind the scenes.
Okay, so you bring up an interesting point, Sip. With a lot of the change that we've seen in college football, especially with how TV has driven it, in your opinion, because I'm with you, I don't think this is going to be this nightmare scenario. We'll figure it out.
No.
We're getting plenty of notice for this too. But from the fans' reaction, do you think this is maybe that knee-jerk reaction of what the hell, what about high school football? But then you get over it just because college football has now lately trained us to realize, hey, you got to get uncomfortable with, or you got to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, essentially.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, if you look at that lineup, look at the lineup, the Fox games on Friday night. Just look at what's going on. I mean, you have USC, or is it USC going to Rutgers or Rutgers going to USC?
Yep.
Yeah, Rutgers to USC on a Friday night. That's discomfort for Rutgers. Don't kid yourself on that. I sit by an assistant coach every day on a radio show here. It is. That's extreme discomfort for a program. It doesn't matter anymore. Again, dictated by TV. I would say this about Illinois: if Nebraska breaks from the gate cleanly, 3-0, and Dylan looks good. Dylan Raiola looks good throwing the ball. There's going to be a lot of it, and they beat Colorado in a highly anticipated night game. I mean, everybody's going to be jacked up. I mean, the stadium will be jacked up for Illinois. Okay, so I keep that in mind. Now, if Nebraska would struggle out of the gate, you kind of wonder what the scene's going to look like. But I don't anticipate that. Nebraska, UTEP is down. UNI is down. Colorado's down. I think. I mean, they lost 8 of their last 9, and God only knows what that team's going to look like. So I think Nebraska will be in 3-0, and I think the fan base will be jacked up. And I think that it's really important for Troy Dannon to make that a great atmosphere. Help do what you can do.
Yep.
Do what you can do, because it's the 400th sellout. It will be the 400th sellout. That's a big part of it. And don't be apologetic. Be positive here. I mean, it can be a very magical night.
Hey, let's because money rules the world, and I absolutely agree with you about the networks control things in college football. We take the paycheck, we turn over the power to them. That's what it's become. But the money is really, really interesting because the Big Ten has outpaced the SEC SIP, $880 million in revenue for the fiscal year. Most schools got $60.5 million. The athletic director just talked about put the South Stadium project on hold. We got to raise some money. We can get premium seating on the East and the West. We had not too long ago, hey, I hear Nebraska is in the $200 million club with Ohio State and Michigan. From what you know, where and with things that are on the horizon of maybe revenue sharing, those kind of things, where is Nebraska athletics at financially, in your opinion? Are they in a really good spot with cash?
I would say strong, but with challenges like everybody. But yeah. Now, it's interesting when you listen to Dan, because obviously it's interesting. And I don't have the books. I don't know. And largely these discussions to me, Gary, are unappealing. It's an unappealing question. Okay. How is Nebraska financially? I don't know. I mean, I wish I didn't have to think about that so much. But again, it seems like it's every conversation now. I'd say they're in a good position. Nobody I don't think is in a perfect position, because there's a line item coming of $20 million probably that you're going to have to pay the student athletes. $20 million is not a small number for anybody. I used to sort of labor under this illusion that Nebraska, they don't have to worry about anything like that. Yeah, they do. I mean, they do have to worry about a $21 million line item, especially in the context of a $450 million renovation of its stadium. So I say strong position, but not without challenges.
If you're factoring in, and I don't know how much you like to get into this one, Sip, about, you mentioned that $20 million line item and how it impacts not just Nebraska, but the entire student athlete experience, all the universities that are involved. If we do get to that point, we know how, and we will, I should say, not if, but when, we know how people, again, have kind of gone with the changes of college athletics. Are we getting close to an unrecognizable model that all of a sudden you do run the risk of alienating a lot of your fans? And we can make this just a Nebraska conversation of it becomes so unrecognizable that your overall support for this football program and student athletes alike, you start to lose that. And I'm not even saying this year or when this becomes, but say in the next 10 years that support just is not there as much as it was, because the student athlete and what has become, especially in college football, just becomes so unrecognizable with being paid, being compensated, and all the money involved.
Well, yeah. Now that's a very grim question.
It is. I know.
It is. Yeah, but I will tell you this. Yes, that crosses my mind, that line of thinking that you just laid out. Yeah, because anecdotally, I know a lot of people who are checking out. Just they're not interested, and they don't like what's going on. Mm-hmm. It's funny because I'm in the same business you are, talk radio, and then I work for a website that's dependent on the health of essentially college sports and college football in particular. Does it cross my mind that I maybe should be a little bit worried? Not right now. It's not an issue right now. It's not. I mean, if you look at stadiums, they're full. The games are great. but that, and I hear that from people, and I think it's very short-sighted when I hear that. Yeah, it is. It's good right now. But what's it going to be like in 4 or 5 years?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I really appreciate, like I retweeted these comments from Jimbo Fisher,
Mm-hmm.
who, the former Texas A&M coach, former Florida State coach. He's out of the business, but he spoke very frankly about the way things are going. And it's really fascinating what he said, that these schools like, and he's not even talking about the group of five. He's talking about the ACC and the Big 12, that there are actually schools in the ACC and Big 12 that are becoming glorified JUCOs, essentially. Yeah. I 100% agree with him. Nobody wants to hear it. They don't. I don't want to hear it. It sucks, okay? It's not the college football I grew up with, that I loved. I want Texas Tech to be a threat. I want Iowa State to be a threat. They're not going to be a threat to anything. They'll be a threat to win some games, and that will be able to knock you off occasionally, but they're not going to be a legitimate threat in 5 years because of the way it's going. Because if they, or Bill Bush had a great example today, a great example of where it's going. Ohio University, I think they won 10 games last year. Okay. They lost 10 starters to the portal, not 10 players, 10 starters. Now at Nebraska, we don't worry about that, right? Nebraska's not going to lose 10 starters, but what if Nebraska lost 10 starters? Then how would you look at college football if you were in our market? How would you feel about college football if Nebraska lost 10 starters to the portal after this year?
You'd feel like the mid-majors and the low majors feel in college basketball. You'd feel like you're playing in the Summit League. I mean, when he said that, I was like, that's what's happening in college basketball, has been happening in college basketball, is the high majors, they use the mid-majors to low majors as their AAA affiliates.
Why is that okay?
I'm not saying it's okay, but that's what's happening. It's there's the pros and the cons if you are the one that are getting fleeced. But you're right. You lose 10 starters in football, that's a major thing. I mean,
you look at life a lot differently.
Yeah. I mean, what this is going down the road, Sip, it's going to be the haves and the have-nots, and there's going to be two separate divisions.
Well, I kind of hope that that's it. I mean, that would probably be a scenario that we could live with, depending on how big the division is of the half. How many is that? That's kind of it. Kind of comes down to that, and how equitable is it?
Hey, we'll get you out on this. Because Andy Staples, who does a lot of work with On3, and there's other national guys. Nebraska's really trendy in the month of May.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, and I would love to ask Andy, did he think of Nebraska as a fringe top 25 team before spring? And if not, what did he hear or see that he's like, I'm all in on Nebraska? They're in that second tier away from Ohio State, Michigan, Oregon, Penn State. I'm putting Nebraska as fifth. And we all go, okay. What do you think has changed that the national vibe has really taken off in this month about what Nebraska could be?
I think it's in some ways it's a simple discussion, and in some ways it's sort of complex. Like it's a sort of a psychological thing. I think a lot of it is Dylan Raiola, of course, right? He looked good in the spring game, and maybe a lot of it's as simple as that. How good that picture looked really good, right? It was a watered down defense. It was built for the offense to do well, and it did. And I think that influenced me. I mean, it did influence me. I knew Dylan would look good. I didn't know that he would look that good. Then so that's how I felt in the immediate. And then in the aftermath, I had to sort of remind myself, okay, what was he playing against? The game was set up for offense, so maybe tempered a little bit. Now, the complex part of it is Nebraska I think a lot of people want Nebraska to be good.
I think that's an element.
I think that because of the fervent nature of the fan base, even the national guys, they tend to hear a lot about Nebraska. And then you have this head coach who's I would say, just the likability factor strong. He's a master salesman. He's out there a lot. I mean, he's a good marketer, and Nebraska markets itself well. And they happen to have a head coach who really, really markets the program well. And I think all that kind of, it feeds into a narrative, right? And what's the narrative really mean? I don't know. But, I mean, I know this. It looks like they're going to be much better at quarterback, and they have a top 10 defense, statistically from last year. It was 7th in average yards allowed per play. I'll make that a top 10 defense. So there's enough there that's real, coupled with this sort of, these things that I don't want to call them fantasy, but it's, marketing in some ways is fantasy, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's influencing the way people think. And that's kind of what happens with Nebraska.
Yeah.
Nebraska is a fascinating animal that way. I mean, it really is.
That's a great way to describe it. Sip, have a wonderful holiday weekend. What's on the docket? Little trip to the lake house?
Yeah, there'll be some lake house. I got a lot of work, actually. I mean, I think I'm going to have to do the baseball thing, the regional announcement.
Okay.
And columns. And so it's not a picnic for me, which is fine.
It never stops for you. There'll be no trip to Costa Rica this year.
God, I wish I could go to Costa Rica.
Save that we need that as a soundbite.
Right. Love you, my man. Have a great holiday weekend.